Hey guys, my name is Brent, and right now I am in Nevada searching for gold. I am headed to the Bonanza King Mine. This is a gold mine established in 1868 that's known for its high quality gold ore. This mine just hit the market for $40 million. And over the past week, I've gotten to talk to the owner of this mine. He's filled me in on the history of this thing and has allowed me to explore it. So I feel like if the opportunity presents itself to explore a $40 million mine, you don't pass that up. So that's where we're going. Let's see what this Bonanza King is all about. One of my favorite things over the past year living here is just all of the potential adventures that are brought my way almost every day. You know, one day it's somebody who knows where there's buried treasure here at Cerro Gordo. The next, it might be about a lost mine that their great-great-grandfather mined, and nobody knows about its location except for them. And I love stuff like this. You know, I think in a day and age where everything is figure-outable with one Google search, it's nice not to know the outcome sometimes and to follow these leads wherever they go. You know, I truly enjoy these adventures, and that's why this week I'm super excited to go check out the Bonanza King Mine. This is a mine, much like all mines, that has a mixture of written and oral history. And anytime you have oral history, you know, exaggerations, substitutions, and just myth can find its way into them. But it's backed up by academic papers and geological studies. And so then, much like a lot of mining towns in the high desert, fact and fiction seem to morph their way together to leave you with a tale that's up to you to figure out. And so for me, I think it's up to me this week to kind of go out there and figure out what part is fact, what part of it might be fiction, and to get to the bottom of it. Over the last 12 months, hearing a lot of these stories, I found that myths seem to all have three kind of central storylines. And the first is probably lost mines. Lost mine seems to be a favorite of the high desert. And this story usually goes where somebody was out mining and for some reason they had to come back, whether it was storms, whether it was weather, or it was the seasons, or they even got pulled away for war or other reasons. And they returned, they could never find this mine again. And probably one of the most famous mining stories in the world is the Lost Dutchman mine. And this mine has inspired countless books and countless movies. And it kind of goes something like this. Once upon a time, there was a mine up in the Superstition Mountains that was mined by this family called the Peraltas. And the Peraltas were up there, and apparently they were killed by the Apache. And further down the line, there was a doctor that was giving treatment to an Apache, supposedly the chief of the whole tribe, and his payment was he was able to be brought blindfolded to a mine, could take all of the ore that he could possibly hold, blindfolded and brought back. And then a guy named Jacob Waltz, that was from Germany, but they called him the Dutchman, found the location of this mine. And he mined it, and he came back to Phoenix with all sorts of ore from a secret mine up in the Superstition Mountains. And he wouldn't tell anybody, but on his deathbed, he told a neighbor in the 1890s. And his neighbor went out, tried to find it, couldn't find it, but came back and started selling maps to this lost mine. And then in the 30s, there's a guy named Adolf Ruth, and he went searching for the Lost Dutchman mine, and he went missing his second day into his hike. And eventually, his skull was found with 2 bullets through it, and all of his belongings were found except for the map to the mine that he had gotten from an Apache. So over the years, thousands and thousands of people have searched for the Lost Dutchman mine. I think something like 9,000 people look for it every year. Dozens of them have died looking for it. And I read a report that there's 62 different variations to this story. So that just shows you how many times a kernel of truth can turn into something full blown. And even here I've heard about all sorts of lost mines, behind bushes, certain trees, even in an earlier video. I was searching through a briefcase and there's a hand-drawn map. was a treasure map. It was a map to a lost mine sent to a friend that said, in the event that I die, here is a map to a mine that was told to me, and they list a name there. So these things are everywhere. It's just part of mining culture and even popular culture with something like the Lost Dutchman. The second common myth I seem to hear a lot about is high grading, or hiding ore deposits from the mine owner. And usually that go in a couple ways. Usually it's, they're down in the mine and they're hiding it in their hair, under their armpits, or something like that. Or they're working a very remote claim that's far from the main claim. And over the years, they've kind of tucked away a hidden portion of the ore to then return to. But again, for some reason, they were pulled away from the mine. And in that time, they were never able to go back. But they told one other soul who now knows the location of this hidden treasure. I am actively pursuing a lead right now that was told to me about high grading, where miners in a remote part of this property were not under the supervision of the owner. So they slowly, over the years, deposited large amounts of silver ore in a place, believing that they would come back in their retirement and retrieve this ore. And so I'm still searching for that. So don't get me wrong, these stories are not pure myth to me. I am open and willing to always go on one of these adventures. The third seems to be last stand mines. Those are a big one, where a miner, against all odds, put his final stick of dynamite in and finally discovered the ore. But in his old age, he was never able to fully explore this mine, or he could never put the resources together to fully mine the claim. And so he passed it down to somebody who passed it down to somebody who's now telling it to me. And I mean, even here at Cerro Gordo, there's tales of the lost vein of silver. Back in the day, they mined something like $500 million worth of silver from this mountain. But it's reported that there's another $500 million worth of silver here, depending on who you ask. Because back in the day, when you take an ore sample, you could be an inch away and never quite hit it. And I hear a lot of variations on those stories. But here's the other thing about myths. Sometimes they're true. You have to think back to even at Cerro Gordo. Pablo Flores came up here on the advice of some Indian guides and found silver, and that became what Cerro Gordo is today. Or Victor Beaudry, the guy that found this store. He was in Independence and he saw an ore sample from Cerro Gordo, and he could have dismissed it as high grading, as somebody cheating the quality of ore from Cerro Gordo. But he didn't. He moved up here. He started this store. He ended up owning the majority of the mine, and it changed his life. And so even when I think about my own life, I go for these myths all the time. When I hear a story of a guy finding a $100,000 pair of Levi jeans in a mine somewhere, that makes me believe that it could be true here. And so what I've been told so far about this mine is this. The last time it was explored was in 1993. And the guy named Dave was hired to explore the upper 3 levels of this mine. As far as I'm told, there's a main shaft there, and there's levels at the 50, 75, and 100. And this shaft is supposedly plugged with a man-made plug at the 115 to prevent water from coming up from the bottom. And if you look at any of the geological reports, it only shows levels at the 150, 175, 225, and 300 foot level. And these upper levels are not written about in any of the reports. But that's okay. These mines were an ongoing operation. There were skeleton crews that would come in after other crews, add new shafts, add new tunnels, and all sorts of stuff. So this isn't uncommon at all. And supposedly, back in 93, when this guy was exploring, he spent 2 days going over every inch of this mine. And at the end of it, he came up, got back into civilization, called the owner of the mine in excitement of what he found, went to his typewriter to start writing up the report, and died. And unfortunately, that was the last person to explore this mine. And the only reports before that date back 100 years. I've also heard that this mine back in the day was so big that it required a 15 stamp mill to process all the ore, which is amazing. That means there's a large operation. And even today, there's reports that there's an 8-mile vein of gold underneath the property, which is be incredible, to figure out something like that. A lot of this shows in these reports. I have reports from Cornell and other places that report about the high quality of the ore that's in this mine. And there's other parts of the story that aren't confirmed at all. These upper 3 levels at the 50, 75, and 100 that were explored in 1993, don't show up on any of the maps that I was given. So I think, you know, much like all great adventures up here, there's a combination of hearsay, there's verified facts, there's probably a little bit of exaggeration, but all that makes a great adventure. You know, what else can you expect when you get a mining town in the high desert? Because I own Cerro Gordo, anytime a mine or even an interesting property goes for sale, I inevitably get a number of emails about the listing. And about by the third time somebody sent it to me, I decided I would call the real estate agent just to see what was going on. You know, I don't have anywhere near $40 million, but I'm always curious about the backstory to a lot of these places. She picked up and she said that I would be able to come out and explore this mine. Nobody had explored this mine since 1993. Okay, the trek to the Bonanza Mine starts. I'm packed up. I am meeting Johnny and Keeler, and we will head on to Reno. Well, well, well.
Ready. Let's do this.
You're already limping.
Yeah, I dropped something on my foot.
Mammoth Mountaineering Supply. We are looking for another one of these. Chest ascender.
It's a crow. My Petzl.
Kroll.
Send us some.
Petzl. Petzl, please, please, Petzl. How far do you think we got till Reno?
A few hours. How many stops are we taking?
The answer is, without stops, 2 hours and 44 minutes.
No, then make it 4 hours. I'm gonna stop a couple times.
All right, the road trip continues. Lakes or mountains?
Mountains for sure.
Why?
I just like climbing.
Fair enough.
Not a big fan of water. Although,
You just don't like water?
well, I need it. Why I answered that question, but I don't. I mean, recreationally, mountains for sure.
Right, what's your favorite food? Asking the hard questions.
I have to get back to you on that. I like a lot of food.
Have you been this far north on 395 before?
No.
Have you been in Nevada before?
Yes, I have. Just Las Vegas, like everyone. But I've never been to Reno. I've only seen it on TV.
Shout out Reno 911.
Earliest childhood memory.
Ooh, that's a good one. So I remember I moved from Boston to Florida when I was like 2-ish. I remember we got a new house, and we pulled up outside the house. And I remember looking at the house, and I used to have like plastic swords as a kid. And I remember thinking that this house was so much bigger than our place in Boston that I would have a ton of room for my swords. That's my first memory. Just thinking like, wow, so much space for swords.
It's official, we've made it to Nevada. Keep it on to Reno. Look at this lake we got. Ah, it's beautiful. The ride up to Reno was amazing. You know, there was that bubbling excitement of an adventure ahead of us, that we were about to find the Levi jeans for the first time. And we got to Reno. Oh man, back in the suburbs. Checked into the hotel for the night. Did a gear check for about the third time to make sure that we had everything. You know, I think it's important on these mine explorations to plan for everything, you know, plan for what if your lights go out? What if this happens? What if that happens? And so I was just rolling around in bed, going over in my head, both what could go right and what could go wrong. Woke up, got some coffee, and headed out. And the mine's about 2 hours all in from Reno. So we got out there probably a little bit after 9. Super excited. You know, as soon as I was there, you see these massive pits. And so there was about 4 different open holes and then a trench. I read in the historic papers that the mine originally started as this trench, you know, that they were kind of like surface mining. And then they sunk shafts at either end of this trench. And then later they sunk an additional shaft just removed from the trench. And what I was told from the owner before getting there is that inside the open trench mine, one end of it connected into the 50 level of the main shaft. And so my goal initially was to go into the trench and hopefully find this entrance to the 50 level, and from there be able to connect it into the main mine shaft. All right, so we're here. So it looks like this is the main shaft here, which is terrifying because it's about, 25, 30 feet across, and it narrows down to a shaft of 8, 10 feet. But, you know, you don't want to bring any of that loose rock. That's the most dangerous thing. Like, one of those rocks would kill you. So over here is this trench that they have, and there appears to be a ladder in the trench that might lead down to somewhere. So I think the game plan is going to be to try to go into this trench first, see where this ladder goes. So Johnny, about initial inspection, what are you feeling?
Down for whatever, just tell me what to do.
Well, early confusion. We were hoping to go down there, and it appears this side of it is nothing. There's this ladder up, that just goes back to the surface that we just came from. Okay, back to the other side of this trench we go. Let's see. I mean, yeah, it looks like a shaft, right? There's track. It's a good sign. You know, this could just be a ventilation shaft, or this could lead into the mine somewhere. I can't get close enough because I don't have any rope. I ran out of rope up there, but there's track here. So that's encouraging at least. And once I get a better view down there, that could potentially lead down into the actual mine shaft. It appears, keeps going back this way a little bit. Bat City. This could have been track. You know, it seems about the width of track. Oh, we got some dynamite wick up there. Let's keep going a ways. It's getting narrower and narrower. Whoa, there's been a big animal back here. Little nest. Alright, this way was a dead end. So maybe that hole was how to get into the shaft.
You shine that light down there?
Yep. Anything down there? Or just end?
There's a level down here.
Is there?
Oh no, wait, hold on, let me get lower.
Alright.
That's it right there, just backfill and lumber or shoring or whatever, but there's nothing that way and nothing down this way. It's just the dead end. So I'm gonna go back up.
Oh.
I know.
It's just in the way.
Watch out.
Yeah. Success. All right. All right. So the trench is a bust. There's nothing to see there. So it would appear final thing left is this giant, massive hole, which I can only assume is the main shaft. But look at all this loose rock around it. Any of that falls on you, you're done. I'm gonna fly my drone down, see if I can get any more intel, but it's not looking great, to be honest. And as I flew my drone down about 30 feet even, I saw the bottom. And so right away, I realized this shaft does not go down 100 feet. What I think happened was, over time, you got a shaft this big, dirt filled in. That's why the entrance is like this, and it kind of goes like this now. So no more exploration, and I will leave the question of whether it has tens of millions of dollars worth of gold in it to a more sophisticated operation than my own. All right, so we're packing out of here. Sometimes things don't quite work out how you wanted them, but they're gonna work out in the end. How do you feel, Johnny?
Sometimes it does work out when you have a bag of Dorito 3Ds at the end of a bullshit.
I think the more time I spend exploring mines and living in mine towns, you realize the lore around mining and the myths. And recently I've been falling for them hook, line, and sinker. And today is another example of just that. You know, I don't blame the realtor, I don't blame the owners. It's just what happens at mines. You know, these mines are over 100 years old, and things change with the earth. You know, there's been earthquakes, there's been floods, there's been monsoons, and all of these things change what's there. And if you're not there year over year, you just don't really know what's happening in these mines. You know, these days, everything is just a Google search away. You know, we can find definitive answers to almost anything immediately. And there's magic lost in that. You know, it simplifies things too much. Our lives are much more mysterious than that. You know, the world is much more mysterious than that. And that mystery is what gives life zest. You know, mystery is what gives us a sense of awe. And I think that's why I love these myths, these stories of speculation. You know, myth and lore is what drew people to these crazy parts of the world to try to find something, whether it was gold or silver or a better life, you know, and the few times the stories paid off led to dozens more when they didn't. But either way, it brought transformation to many of them, both good and bad. And transformation is an important part of myths throughout history. You know, these stories of found silver sparked excitement in people and continued this tradition of storytelling that keeps mystery and excitement alive up here in the high desert. It made people imagine that they were the ones finding this lost silver vein and that they were heroes in their own story. But that feeling of not knowing if something's true or not is increasingly foreign in today's world. You know, there's less mystery in the world every day. We wrap ourselves around in facts and insulate ourselves against the magic of myths. We convince ourselves that we know the world, but by doing so, we get further away from what it is to live in a world of excitement, you know, with a sense of unknown and adventure. And to fake this feeling, we turn to things like Star Wars, Spider-Man, Lord of the Rings, and others. And it's an attempt at modern myth, but it's purely fiction. You know, I think the best myths are those with a seed of truth, you know, that could potentially be the real thing. So for me, these tales of the desert remind me of the possible. You know, the fact that things aren't always what they seem. And sometimes, maybe, there's treasure waiting around the next bend.